Hey everybody, this is Anil Nathan, co-founder of Rafter and host of our expert interview series where we speak with professionals across every aspect of home ownership to share their expertise and advice. Today I'm joined by my other co-founder, Marcus Cohn, as well as Jack Courson, who's a project manager for Cannon Mechanical and an experienced HVAC professional across both the residential and commercial spaces. Jack, thanks for joining us today.
Thanks for having me.
Awesome. So maybe to start, I know you have like a pretty broad experience in the HVAC world. Can you just tell us a little bit about your career and what you've done in the HVAC space?
Yeah, so my career started with just basic HVAC for residential homes, and it started with school. I went to school for, a universal CFC license, and then I branched off into the commercial. When I moved into New York area, my boss hired me. I do larger scale HVAC projects now, chiller projects, chiller plants, and it's mostly fit outs of commercial spaces with ductwork and larger systems. But the principles are all the same between homes and commercial spaces. The point is the same: either cool or heat a space. And so I've done projects for friends on the side, and I've worked for other companies doing residential. So it's really similar stuff between the commercial world and home HVAC systems. So that's my background, mostly is commercial now.
Great. Can you tell us a little bit about, for folks who aren't as intimately familiar with the components of an HVAC system, what are the different components that one usually finds in a residential system or in a home?
Well, the typical home will have an air handler. Air handler is going to be what serves the air into the residential space, your inside space. And then you're going to have an outdoor condenser if it's that type of system, a forced air system. If it's not a forced air system, you'll see a boiler in conjunction with an air handler, maybe if it's just a single a coil or a single road coil just for cooling the space. There's mini splits that you'll see in spaces, and depending on the age of the house, it might just be a boiler and a mini split system. And those are typically what you would see, those types of components, which would either be radiators, hot water radiator system, a steam radiator system in some houses. But if it's a newer home, most homes today have a condenser, outdoor condenser, which is the outside coil, has the compressor components, and then you have a line set that runs into your home. It goes to an A coil that has a blower on it, and depending on if it has a hot water system and a boiler system that feeds a hot water coil, you could have many different variations that people will see on the inside of the home. Hot water coil and behind the A coil, or it could just be a heat pump system with an electric coil. So there's many different variations, but the point is it can either heat or cool your home.
Yeah, definitely. And I mean, I think it's interesting when we see so many different combinations, as you mentioned, right, in terms of homes in Westchester in particular. And as homes are getting modernized and people are replacing systems, you're starting to see kind of maybe transition to heat pumps and all that, which would be great to dig into in a little bit. But, one of the first things that we wanted to talk about is we're obviously making, hopefully, the full transition from winter into spring. And warmer weather. And so homes are now transitioning off of their heating systems and now, potentially transitioning at some point in the near future into needing your cooling systems to work. So as we're starting to talk with our members about getting ready for that and making that transition as successful as possible, what are some of your biggest tips or things that homeowners should know about when it comes to, all right, I'm going to start needing to use my AC again. How do I make sure that that's ready to go?
I mean, just first thing that comes to mind is frequent air filter changes. I mean, it seems to fall on the back burner so often that people just don't think about changing air filters. But it's more often than not one of the biggest failures in HVAC systems is you don't change the filter enough, and it causes the pressures in the system to change. The compressor is working harder, and it's not good for that system. So the first thing to do is check your filter. If you haven't changed it all winter, now would be a good time to change your filter.
Yeah, and we have definitely seen some filters that have their age is definitely older than 1 year, 1 season. But it's interesting to hear that the filter in and of itself, obviously I think we think about filters as like, okay, it purifies the air and removes things, but it's interesting to think about like filters as actually having an influence on the effectiveness of the system, the lifespan of the system, the efficiency of the system. That's a pretty critical component of the entire equation, right?
Right. So over time, having a clogged filter will just cause your system work extra hard, and that can cause component failures. And it also will affect the air quality. It will affect the air quality in your home if it's not changed on a frequent basis. You get, ducts will build up with dust if you don't change your air filter enough. You could have to do duct cleaning because you don't change your air filter enough. But in addition to that, just making sure, when you're changing that filter, take a quick peek on the inside. Take a look at the coil. There's typically a slot where you're pulling the filter from, and you can stick a phone in there with a flashlight and just take a quick look at your coil and see if dust is getting past the filter. Does the coil on the inside need to be cleaned? Because a clogged coil will do the same thing as a clogged filter. It'll slow the efficiency down on the system, cause it to work harder, and can cause premature component failures. And then in addition to that, a simple thing for most homeowners to do is if they have an outdoor condenser in conjunction with their cooling system, check the outdoor coil. A lot of leaves fell this winter. If they weren't covering their outdoor AC coil, which is recommendable because it just keeps the leaves and debris from building up around the condenser coil on the outside. If you have a hose, spray it down. They sell common coil cleaners at the store. Just be careful to wear the right stuff because those chemicals, you don't want to breathe them in. They can be harmful, but there is green coil cleaners that are okay and not super hazardous for a person's health, that you can spray on the outdoor condenser and just spray it off yourself. You can spray from the inside of the coil out towards the outside, so you're not packing it full of more dirt. But it's something that any homeowner can simply do with a hose and a little bit of cleaner.
Great. We kind of work with and have spoken with a lot of folks who have service contracts, so contracts with companies to help them maintain their systems. Maybe they're not wanting to get the coil cleaner out or poke their head inside their air handler. So give us maybe the landscape of service contracts. Like, what are the most important things if you're gonna be looking to bring on someone to service your units? What's the most important things that should be included in that contract in a given year?
Well, if a person isn't gonna many people have busy lives, right? And that's why you do service contract. If you don't have the time to do it yourself, you're gonna end up paying somebody to maintain your equipment for you. And you want to make sure that they're doing those basic things. I think those basic things that you could do on your own should all be included if you're paying premium for somebody to do it. Coil cleaning, filter changes. If those aren't on there and the person isn't doing it, they're not doing their job. Those are such basic things that need to be done on the system. And if they're not in the service contract, then that's a huge red flag that somebody's selling you junk. Some other things that are important to check would be that, are the capacitors good on the outdoor condenser? That's a common thing that will go off. The capacitor is what jump starts the compressor on its first start, and then it's a start run capacitor. It's made to start the compressor and then keep it running. And so if that capacitor goes, you might have power to the unit, but the unit's not going to come on, and that's a common problem that can happen. And they make your voltage meters, if a service contractor as a service contract, they should be checking those to make sure that the microfarads are in the right range. And they could tell if a capacitor is going to go sooner rather than later, instead of in the middle of summer getting an emergency phone call. They could probably suggest, hey, this part looks like it's getting on its last leg. They should be suggesting, hey, we should replace this part. If they're not checking those parts, that's a red flag. Making sure that the system has proper charge. Insufficient charge will just cause the system to work extra hard again. So if they're not hooking up their gauges at some point within the years, I don't know, however long the contract is, if they're not hooking up their gauges at some point to check the charges that they're within the proper ranges, and that's just another red flag that should be in those contracts if you're paying a premium. Why pay a professional if they're not going to use the equipment that's made to be used as a professional? Most homeowners don't have a set of manifold gauges laying around their house to check charges with. So, of course, that should be something that a professional should do. They have to make sure they do it correctly, though. So one thing that amongst the industry that's bad practice is not bleeding those gauges properly, and then they allow oxygen to infiltrate the system, which then corrodes the parts inside and causes premature compressor failure. So that's just bad practice on a technician's part. They're not bleeding the gauges with refrigerant before connecting the gauges to those condensers. That's something that a homeowner, if they're paying somebody to do, it's not something that you would particularly always be checking. But if you see your technician just hook up gauges without bleeding those lines, that's a big red flag that it could cause oxygen to infiltrate your system, prematurely break down those components, because the refrigerants in systems today can be corrosive, and then it will cause those compressors to fail sooner.
Makes sense. So when you're looking at a potential company to have a contract for your home, what are the hallmarks of a good HVAC service company? What should one of our members or a member of the general public be looking for when they're selecting an HVAC service contract vendor?
Someone that answers the phone. It sounds simple, but just customer service is such a huge part. If a contractor, if you have to beg your contractor to come out and service your system, then that contractor's not doing their job. It's so easy to set up calendars for our own lives today, set reminders on our phones to let us know when we need to brush our teeth or drink some water. Or if an HVAC company, if you have to call your HVAC company to come service your system and they're not calling you, that's a big red flag in my opinion. They should be setting those appointments up for you as part of their service. And they should be trying to schedule it within what's convenient for you, to let them access your home if they need to get in, to change a filter on a system or to check a coil or whatever. The point is to me, that customer service, if they're not answering emails or not answering phone calls, then that's not something that you want in a company.
Yeah, it's such a great but simple kind of answer, because it's kind of both sides. Right? Obviously, you need like the expertise and all the things you were talking about, like to bleed the lines before you test it with your gauge and checking refrigerant levels and all that type of stuff. But the fundamental part of being responsive, kind of delivering great service. I mean, that's very much how we think about establishing relationships with service providers, and in particular HVAC service contractors, is that first step, right? Like, are you going to deliver great service to our members and even answer our calls and engage with us on that level? And so definitely resonates a lot, both with our rafter hats on, but also as homeowners. I think that's one of the biggest challenges that we find.
Yeah, I kind of seem to find that when a company is responsive, they're going to have responsible people working for them as well. You could have the best mechanic, but if he doesn't show up to the job, what's the point of having him? If he's not showing up on time when he says they say they're going to be there, what's the point of having them? It's not, to me, that they're not doing their job if they're not being they're not being responsive to the customer's needs.
Great answer. Maybe, we were talking about air filters before, and we were talking about, you kind of mentioned duct cleaning briefly. So that obviously air quality as, something that people care about in general, super important no matter what, but especially for a lot of our members and, people in this area who have young families, air quality, thinking about your kids and, what they're breathing is just so very top of mind. And so love any, what are some of the most important things that you think homeowners should be thinking about when it comes to air quality in their homes?
Well, I'll go back to the basics again. If you're changing your filter regularly, more than likely the air quality in your home is probably, good. But if you stop changing your air filter on a regular basis, then that could potentially lead to harmful things, especially if the filter gets wet or if your coil is wet. Things aren't draining properly out of the evaporator's drain pan or something that gets on the filter. Mold could grow. You could have, it's important to change that filter. There's portable devices out there now that HEPA filters. Ever since COVID, there was a huge boom in the sale of like personal filtration systems for homes. I mean, they've always kind of been around, but not like they have nowadays. Like they have way more options, way more than what a person would actually probably need for their home, if they would just change their filters regularly in their home on their systems. In addition to that, anything that you have to better filter the air in your home, I think is a good thing. Personally, I have a small HEPA filter in my own home that we use, and it gives you peace of mind, right? A lot of people need that peace of mind for themselves. If you ever think that you have a buildup of extra dust, like you're doing too many, you're having to pull the Swiffer out too much to dust your home, then look at the filter on your HVAC system. That could be one of the culprits of that much dust being in your house. I'm not sure if that answered the question, but
yeah,
one of the things I think, and we were touching base on duct cleaning. If you have a floor register, the duct is probably going to have some stuff in it the first 12 to 18 inches of that duct, especially if it's a floor register, just because gravity is going to cause things as natural to go that way. But if you pull that register off and there's not a huge buildup, then it's possible that the rest of your duct is probably clean. Pretty high probability that the rest of your duct is clean if you don't see huge buildup right at the register.
Got it. Yeah, I mean, I think the point around air filters, which has come up a couple times now, both in terms of like system effectiveness as well as air quality. I mean, it's a great example of kind of the 80-20 principle in action. Like you get 80% of the way just by doing 20% of the things, and like replacing your air filters feels like very much in that 20%, right? I mean, if you just do that on a regular basis, then you're accomplishing so much for your system in terms of extending its lifespan, making it work more efficiently, improving the air quality in your home. But as you mentioned, it's one of those things that, and we see this as well, and it's part of the kind of way that we help members stay on top of those things. Is it's just so easy to forget, right? It's so easy to let it slide for 6 months, 12 months, a year, 18 months, whatever it might be, and then you're kind of dealing with the after effects at the end of it.
Yeah, absolutely. It should be a frequent thing, and it's something that we all forget. Again, that's why I think if you are going to have a service contract, that should be one of the reasons that you should look for in a service company, is that they are reminding you about your next service. And that's a sign of a good company that's doing the right thing.
Great. Changing topics maybe a little bit. Love to pick your brain a little bit on energy efficiency. I think that's a topic that a lot of our members and a lot of conversations we have kind of circulate around. So tell us a little bit about, heat pumps to start, and can you dispel any myths around whether they can work well in specifically the Westchester area, the Northeast, and sort of maybe a little bit about what they are and why they're so popular these days.
Well, a lot of it has to do with NYSERDA, New York energy credits and things like that people are getting kickbacks for using heat pumps rather than they're trying to push things towards electric, right, to get off of fossil fuels. That's one of the things that is a reason why they're pushing heat pumps. I think the most efficient system you could ever have in your home is a geothermal system, because you're just using the energy from the earth. If you have the space and the money to do it, by all means, do geothermal. It's the best system out there. But heat pumps in and of itself, there's the theory that it doesn't work, in colder temperatures. It's not true anymore. The systems that they have out today, Mitsubishi being a big rep company that makes some of the most high efficient heat pumps for some of the coldest temperatures out there, those things, they really kick butt. They do a good job. And if you're looking at a heat pump system, a DC inverter condenser that turns, that runs at lower variable speeds, right, that it can save you energy versus an older standard heat pump for sure. If you had an older heat pump in your house with just an electric coil, for whenever it gets too cold, it will, flip out. You're going to save energy eventually. Always going to save energy doing with a higher efficiency heat pumps nowadays, especially those DC inverted style heat pumps. There is a lot of disparaging about it going around there, but I don't think it's really true. Heat pumps are a fascinating and wonderful part of the HVAC world, and it's really just a refrigeration cycle in reverse. Instead of extracting heat from the inside of your house and putting it outside in the summer, you're doing the reverse. You're trying to extract heat from that cold air and bring it into your house. So it makes a lot of sense to do it. And you might want to do a combination, right? A heat pump with a boiler system that switches to natural gas. But the prices of natural gas and electricity nowadays are getting so similar, especially in this area. Just talking to different homeowners myself, the price of natural gas has skyrocketed for a lot of people. And so it might make sense budget-wise, if you can do the math and figure it out. A lot of the HVAC companies today, that if you're thinking of doing a system upgrade, will do a lot of the credit work and leg lifting for you with getting credits for these types of systems to go in your home.
Great. Yeah, we've worked with several members that have either partially or fully electrified, and it's been great to see the vendors sort of handhold them through the credit process. They make it really easy just to go ahead and get the system in, and they take care of all the paperwork, which is fantastic. Outside of sort of the installing heat pumps, any tips you can offer for improving efficiency, whether that's smart thermostats, replacing or air filters? Like, what are other things that homeowners can easily do to make their home even just incrementally more energy efficient?
They make that window wrap that goes over your, I don't know how well it works, but that's just a simple, cheap thing. You see it all the time. Plastic. Windows and doors are probably your biggest infiltrators. If you're not going to re-insulate all of the walls in your home, check your windows and doors. Do they have good seals around them? Do they have good weather stripping on them? Are the seals broken on your windows? If you have a thermal pane type of window with the double pane glass, like what are those simple things? Does it make sense to replace your windows versus upgrading your whole system? Obviously, a smart thermostat, like you mentioned before, it makes a lot of sense. If you're not home and you can save energy by not running your system at its full capacity, yeah, by all means, get a smart thermostat. have it work with your schedule. The ones, the thermostats that they have today will get to know your schedule and automatically adjust with algorithms, which is awesome. I encourage smart thermostats all the way. It just makes sense. Your system runs less. You'll save energy. You'll save wear and tear on the system as well, and you won't have to change the filter as often, right? With less usage. But little things just like checking windows and doors and make sure that they're all sealed tight, nice and weather tight, will save a tremendous amount, I think, in homeowners. There's just so many cruddy windows out there on old homes nowadays that could easily be fixed with just a little bit of weather stripping and DIY at home.
Yeah, I love that, the focus on kind of the sealing, drafty windows, doors. I mean, that's one of the things that obviously we're coming out of the winter season now, but when it's really cold, I think people feel that, especially right when there's a drafty window or a drafty door. And I think a lot of homeowners are unaware that it can be a pretty easy fix, right? There's some pretty small things that you can do that can go a long way. And then talking about HVAC systems, to your point, you can have the most efficient HVAC system in the world, right? You can have a geothermal system installed in your home, but if your windows and doors are leaky, if you don't have the right level of insulation in your attic and in your basement to like keep that energy in, it's ultimately not going to be efficient, right? And so all of these things are connected, and you can get a lot of bang for your buck by doing some of these small things.
Yeah, no, I agree. Yeah, it's such a small little thing. It might just be a little tube of caulking that you need, and that could drastically reduce the energy costs in your home.
100%. Awesome. Well, this has been super insightful. I think the last question we were going to ask, I think I know the answer, is what's one thing that you wish every homeowner knew or did more of with their HVAC systems? So maybe putting aside replacing your air filters, we'll make a plug again for everybody listening. Replace your air filters on a regular basis. But is there anything else any other last piece of wisdom or advice you would give to homeowners out there?
If you're planning on working on your own HVAC system, just do it safely. They're high voltage systems. Lock them out, tag them out. You don't want to electrocute yourself if you're planning on doing something on your own. Do your research, and there's a wealth of knowledge on YouTube. If you don't know about something, you could pretty much Google or YouTube something and figure it out. And that's if you're more curious about your own HVAC system, you can find, I'm pretty sure, a video out there that would explain how your system works for your home. And there's probably a piece of information out there. We have a wealth of knowledge at our hands and fingertips today with the internet. And if you don't have the time, ask the experts. But if you have the time to do it yourself, then do the research before just jumping in and diving into a system that you might not know.
Great advice, and we'll make a plug for anybody who's listening who's not a member. If you have any questions about your HVAC system or are interested in doing some things DIY, to your point, would just like a sounding board, we're happy to help. One of our home advisors would be happy to jump on a quick call and talk to you about the questions that you're working through or things that you're looking at. You can reach us at welcome@rafterhome.com. But thank you, Jack, so much for the time and the advice and expertise. Super helpful, and I just always appreciate it.
Absolutely. Thank you guys for having me. Appreciate it.